Hello, welcome to one of my audiobooks. This is my most recent book. Like all of my audiobooks, these are books I have written and I am trying, but have not as of yet succeeded in getting a literary agent or an editor or, a publishing house interested in. These are primarily videos made for my mother so she can read my books, but anyone else is more than welcome to watch. Also, if you happen to know anyone in the publishing field who you think might be interested, feel free to send this to them. This is Shadow and Light by Elaine Allen. Chapter 1. Tila was nervous about this job. There was a party in the governor's manor tonight. They were on Milliken Island, and this far into the core of the Victorial Islands, the percentage of guards to citizens was far too high, and their little group stood out. The vagrant thieves could pass for Victorials at a distance, but even in the vast empire of the Victorial Islands, their size and delicate features drew attention. They averaged out at barely 5 feet tall and usually weighed under 100 pounds. And goddess bless the boy, Mika stood out more than most. Mika was going to be at the center of the party. The manor was too hard to infiltrate without someone to let them in. They needed enough gold to make it the rest of the way to the capital, live for at least 2 weeks, and escape pretty quickly. The only place they could hope to get that much at once was from the tax boxes. So Mika had gotten himself invited in as a musician and was going to sneak off around midnight to open the back gate. Any number of things could go wrong. The servants could be keeping too good an eye on the musicians, the nobles could refuse to give Mika a break, they could recognize him as a vagrant and throw him out, he could get cornered in an empty room with someone expecting more entertainment than music, someone might notice he had at least a dozen warrants to his name. But he was Mika. He could talk a snake out of biting, the rain out of falling, and time out of passing. What had Tila concerned was the apprentices, Andrew and Sarah. They were barely older than children and were born free islanders. They ran away from home and found a thief, Callum, that would teach them basics. Mika and Tila were heading in towards the core islands when they ran into Callum in passing and mentioned needing a couple extra hands on the next job. He had refused to come, but had offered the kids to them. Mika had declared that barely trained hands were better than none. Tila found them more than a bit annoying. They had passed Mika's tests, cutting a guard's purse, climbing a city wall, and picking locks, but she didn't trust that they'd keep their head when things went wrong. Part of being a thief was knowing that things would go wrong and being ready to readjust. She glanced across at them now, both dressed like caricatures of thieves. Tight black trousers and black tunics with long black scarves tied around their necks that they could pull up to hide their faces. She rolled her eyes. Tila was wearing brown trousers and a green vest over a darker green tunic. She could wander into the market after this job and no one would look twice. Those two idiots would be picked up by the Van Ter cloaks the moment they stepped into any public place after dark. Originally, they were also wearing belts covered with little pockets full of lockpicks and skeleton keys. Mika had taken one look at them, demanded, "Are you hoping to play thieves in a pageant?" And they had taken them off. The only part of the vagrant rat costume they had missed was footwear. They were both wearing soft, leather-soled boots. Tila was barefoot, like her people generally were. Mika was wearing boots, but only because he wouldn't be allowed in the manor if he arrived dressed as a traveling bard, but barefoot. Currently the kids were practicing juggling while they waited for Mika. Though now was not the time or place, Tila did approve of that. The kids had been disappointed when Callum told them that most vagrants tried their damnedest not to resort to theft. Juggling, singing, dancing, playing music, even street magic was easier and less dangerous. Most of her people chose prostitution before they chose anything more serious than picking pockets. "If you drop that torch, Sarah, I'm going to tie you to the gate in front of the guardhouse," Tila threatened, glancing over her shoulder. The girl blushed, grabbed the torch, and tucked it back into her bag. Sarah's brother, Andrew, frowned. "She told you. Her name is Delia, and mine's Kiar." Tila rolled her eyes. They had chosen their own names, clearly not realizing they meant afternoon nap and coughing. They weren't names. Callum had laughed his ass off as he introduced them. It had become a trend among rebellious free islanders to give themselves Tamarin names, though they usually found out what the names meant first. She had met 3 shadows in the last year, a lightning, and a crow. She was pretty damn sure no Tamarin had ever given any of them those names, though she liked the man calling himself Quicknoxic enough to ignore the fact that he had literally named himself the Thief. "Look sharp," Tila hissed, as the gate across the road opened. She checked to see if anyone was watching before they dashed out of the alley. She didn't say a word to Mika as she slipped past him into the back garden and across to the shadows of the stable. Mika shut and barred the gate behind them before he headed back inside, already smiling at the servant girl who had followed him, either to check up on him or just because he was Mika. His bright blue eyes sparkled, his blonde curls catching the moonlight like fine silk. "Rin! What's your favorite song? I'll sing it next." He reached out as he passed, resting his hand on the small of the girl's back. Though she was a good 4 inches taller than him, she blushed bright red, mumbling something while she tried to cover her cheeks with her hands. Tila wasn't entirely sure how she could look so much like her cousin, and yet so completely different. Yes, her coloring was different. She had black hair and dark eyes, but they shared similar delicate, sharp faces, bow-shaped lips, and large almond eyes. Her guess was that Mika's abundant charm came from the energy he animated those features with. Tila gave the 2 apprentices one quick glance to make sure they were not doing something stupid, and slipped around to the side of the stable. Thomas had done reconnaissance yesterday, acting as one of the day laborers hired to set up for the party. He said there was a back door into the manor house behind the stable. He hadn't been able to make sure it led to the treasury because it had been locked, and he had neither the time nor the skill to pick the lock. But it led to the right section of the building. Tila waved for the kids to keep watch, slipped her favorite lockpick from the seam line of her vest, and got to work. She dug her toes into the dirt floor of the yard and called up just a hair more shadow than would be natural. It was a subtle enough effect that she would be surprised if the kids noticed. The last thing she needed was the idiots demanding she teach them magic. The lock gave quickly, clearly having been well oiled. She opened the door a crack, holding it until she was sure no one was on the other side, then pulled it open enough for the kids to step inside. As soon as the door shut, she quickly murmured to Andrew, "Relock it." He looked like he was about to question her, so Tila shot him a sharp look and commanded his sister, "Search right." Tila was going left, because she was pretty sure left was the correct direction. The hallway was not as dark or as dusty as she had hoped for. She had hoped that this was a disused section of the manor, but she was suddenly suspicious that the Milliken Island governor kept his treasury next to his personal chambers. She wouldn't put it past him, considering this was the only island she had heard of where the tax boxes were kept at the governor's manor in the first place. She pulled shadow around her and glanced around the corner. There were 2 guards standing in front of a door halfway down the hall. She took another quick glance to make sure the guards were wearing the red tabards of tax guard, then backtracked to Andrew. She snapped her fingers, catching Sarah's attention, and waving her back. "We've got guards," she murmured, watching to see what their reaction would be. The boy pulled a dagger from his belt. She slapped him upside the head. They had planned for this. She nodded to Sarah. "Nightingale." The girl blushed and reached into her bag, pulling out the small pouch of crushed herbs. It was lighter than it should have been. Tila gave the girl a demanding look. Sarah whispered, "We tested it earlier." Was she fucking kidding? This shit had cost them the last of their ready money. They literally didn't have a single copper coin left, and the 3 silvers Mika had sent them to the market with had been barely enough to buy 2 doses. If they ran into any other guards, servants, or lost party guests, these idiots had screwed them. Andrew was already looking defensive. "We didn't know how it worked, and might need to." Goddess help her, if she didn't need the extra hands to carry the fucking tax box, she would send them back outside and never work with them again. Shaking her head, she pulled out a little bag from her own belt. This was the reason she hadn't been able to go to the market to buy the Nightingale herself. Tila had spent the afternoon foraging the marshes for wild ribbon pepper. She pulled out a pinch of the powdered pepper and put it under her tongue. The stimulant wasn't strong, but it was enough to counteract the Nightingale. She handed the bag over to Sarah. "1 pinch under your tongue." And while they were both taking their own, she grabbed the other pouch from Sarah and snuck back to the corner. Pouring it out on her hand, she saw they barely had enough left for 1 attempt. Breathing shallowly to keep herself from disturbing the fine powder, she centered herself, her feet firm on the cold stone floor, even shifting the rushes out of the way with her toes. Stone didn't speak as well or clearly as earth, but it helped her draw the layout in her mind. She felt for drafts, and when she was sure she knew how the air moved, she stepped around the corner and blew. The combination of a trained musician's lungs and a hint of magic directed the powder into the faces of the guards, right as they were taking a breath to call out. The herb hit their sinuses, and they were unconscious on the floor before either could make a sound. Andrew slipped past Tila, heading straight for the door. She hissed at him to stop. The powder was still drifting through the air like early morning fog. You said the ribbon pepper would counter it. A little, you moron, and keep your voice down. She waited until the air cleared, then moved carefully so as to not stir up the dust that was settling on the ground. Exposed to air, its potency wouldn't last long, but its effect on the guards wouldn't last long either. She waved for Sarah to go watch the corner, guessing from the bounce in her step that the girl had taken more than a pinch of the pepper. She'd be shitting herself silly in about an hour, but they should be done and back at their camp by then. While Tila worked on the lock, this one far more complex than the one on the outer door, Andrew asked, "Why not get closer to use the sleeping powder so you don't waste any?" "Keep watch." She normally would have left it at that, but the more they learned, the less stupid mistakes they would make. Couldn't give them the time to cry out, and in concentrated doses, Nightingale kills. The boy paled and Tila softened. They really were good kids. They were just too excited for caution, too sure of their own ability, and the kind of young that thought it would be heroic to be hung as a thief. Tila knew there was nothing heroic or romantic about it. You died shitting yourself in front of a crowd with a bag on your head in case your eyeballs popped. And most vagrants were too light to break their own necks in the fall, so they had the long dance waiting for the rope to strangle them. The lock gave, and Tila slipped inside the treasury. She was annoyed but not surprised to find the tax boxes behind another lock, in a cell at the back half of the room. She skirted past the counting table and shelf of record books, giving one quick glance back at the apprentices. She couldn't see Sarah, and so she assumed she was still on watch in the hallway, but Andrew was leaning over the guards, maybe checking their vitals, maybe picking their pockets. Tila hissed at him, "Leave them alone." She waved him over to the record shelf, murmuring, "See if you can find anything useful." She wanted him where he couldn't do any harm. This lock was going to take work. She pulled out a third pick, trying to do this quickly. The guards wouldn't stay down for long. They didn't know when the guard shift would be changing, and they were not far enough from the main hall. She could hear music and chatter from the party as she worked. She could hear Mika's clean, sharp tenor cutting across the sounds of the other musicians. He was singing the Soldier's Market song, about as safe a song as he could sing for a noble victorial crowd. One of her picks broke, but the tumblers gave, and Tila pushed the gate open. "Andrew," she hissed, waving for him to help her with one of the boxes. They were heavy as hell, probably weighing half as much as Tila herself, which is why she needed the kids. Thomas could have lifted it on his own, but Thomas was terrible at night work. He was too big, slightly clumsy, with pale brown hair. He stood out in shadows. So he was waiting with the cart just outside of the alley. They just had to get the box to him before anyone knew it was gone. They were just stepping over the guards, Tila waving for Sarah to head back to the courtyard door to unlock it, when she noticed something. Mika had changed songs to a rousing Angolese reel called Run for the Hills. Fuck. Sarah looked back at her and Tila nodded sharply. "Switch with me, hurry." Even one pick down, she was quicker than the kids by half. As soon as Sarah had the back handle, Tila ran for the door. It was unlocked by the time the kids caught up, and throwing caution to the wind, she opened it wide enough for them without checking to see if anyone was on the other side. They slid out just as she heard a cry of surprise from the treasury. She pulled the door shut behind her. "Jump ship," she whispered to the wind, sending it towards Mika. The kids were already stepping out of the shadows towards the far door, but Tila caught Sarah's elbow. "Leave the box," she commanded. This was a cut-and-run situation. They didn't have time to unbar the back gate, carry the box down the alley, get it in the cart, and far enough away not to get caught in the search. Sarah dropped her handle. Andrew did not. "We're almost out." Tila didn't even have time to respond before the outcry rang out through the courtyard. "Stop! Thieves!" Sarah made a run for the door they had come in through. Tila went for the stable. She had spotted a way over the wall there, and they had a better chance if they scattered. She was already climbing, her foot on the edge of the water barrel, when she realized Andrew was still struggling across the yard with the damn tax box. "Drop it and go!" she hissed. His sister was heading back to help him, but 4 guards were running to cut off their route to the door. Tila dropped back to the ground, landing on top of the box, pulling it from Andrew and Sarah's grip. She pushed the boy towards the stables, commanding, "Up and over!" She pushed Sarah towards the gate. Of the two, Andrew could climb more quickly. Sarah's skill at moving through crowds gave her the better chance of getting past the guards. Tila dodged under the wild grab a guard made for her and dashed for the main hall. It was a terrible idea, but both kids were moving, and the guards were frazzled enough that they hesitated. That was all Tila had the time to see before she was in the middle of the party. None of the party guests tried to stop her, most of them jumping out of her way as if she were dangerous. Then tax guards were streaming in from one hall, the governor's private guards were stepping out from their stations by the wall, and a clump of soldiers that had been chatting by the tables were coming her way. She dodged a lady in a dress with skirts longer than Tila was tall, pushed a man in a garish orange jerkin out of her way, and slid under the table of wine glasses. She stood up on the far side, and a Vanterre guard stepped in front of her in a swirl of unnaturally black fabric. She barely avoided him, rolling backwards over the table and looking for an exit. A window was opened by the musician's dais, probably left open by Mika, who was nowhere to be seen. She took one step, saw movement out of the corner of her eye, and dropped, dodging a sword. Then she heard a sharp voice command, "Christopher, right! David, left!" Tila couldn't help but turn and look, saw sandy blonde hair over an unnaturally black cloak, and paid for her distraction with an arm around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She had been caught.